Welcome back to the shop. My name is Jacob with the Wood Plank, and in this video I'll take you through the process of how I made these two end grain cutting boards. They're made from walnut, cherry, and hard maple. These were a lot of fun to make, and I hope you find this video resourceful and helpful. Towards the end of the video, I'll share with you my recipe for my own board conditioner. So stick around for that. Let's go make some sawdust. This particular style is a gradient from a dark wood to a light wood, otherwise known as an ombre board. I start by cutting all of these boards to 24 inches long. I want to end up with 4 panels to mix and match from, and I specifically chose this piece of cherry because the sapwood's really going to help transition into the maple. My goal here is to take those boards and start ripping them into individual strips. Keeping a nice variety of thin, medium, and thick material really helps with the gradient. There are a variety of ways you could create this board. This is just my take on it. 137 strips of domestic hardwood with endless possibilities. From there, I'll run each piece through the drum sander. This is a very time-consuming process, but vital to the glue up and overall quality of the finished product. If you don't have a drum sander, I would just run each one of these through the planer, and maybe in the beginning of the build, make these strips a little bit longer to allow for snipe. Anytime I'm working with multiple panels, I like to stack them on top of each other. This gives me an initial idea of how the final piece is going to look. And if there's something that I'm not happy with, it's easy to make a change now. After everything's been cut, sanded, numbered, and organized, it's time for the first glue up. I'm building these particular cutting boards in a landscape orientation. Here's a quick sketch I made to show you how different this design would look in a landscape versus a portrait. You're essentially building the design horizontally versus vertically. A brick style cutting board is a great example of how different a design can look between landscape and portrait. I personally like to build brick boards in a landscape style, but if you wanted to reference this idea a little clearer, I would just go look at a few different brick boards. Here's a photograph of an ombre brick board that I completed not that long ago. When the temperatures get below freezing, the boards come inside. On to day 2, and I'm going to get these boards out of the clamps and flattened out. Well, until the day I get a 20-inch panel through a 13-inch planer, I'm going to go ahead and go old school. So after each glue up, the goal is to get each panel flat, straight, and smooth again. So when your panels don't fit through the planer, your work is a little more involved. The easiest method that I've come up with is to just make a flattening jig. Here I'm using 2 pieces of oak and a little sled and I'll take a little bit off at a time and work my way down to a nice flat panel. After that little sawdust session, I ran all 4 panels through the drum sander to get them smoothed out. I want this board to be 2 inches thick. So when I'm cross-cutting these panels, I cross-cut them at about 2 2/16. That way, when I move on through the next steps and I lose a little bit of material, I'll still end up at 2 inches. After everything was cross-cut and sanded, I laid out all the pieces for the final design. And when I started this project, I was going to build 2 identical cutting boards. But at this point I realized it would be kind of fun just to freestyle one and just see what kind of designs I could come up with. So I split the stack in half and turned up the music. Once I have my final design and all of my pieces where I like them, I'll usually strike a line down the board. This will keep things straight when it's time for the final glue up. I think these boards are good examples of creating with a plan but no plan. I knew I wanted to make some gradient boards but wasn't sure how it would translate. Creating in the moment is really my favorite type of building and making. It's kind of hard to do with woodworking because you do need to plan ahead, but there is a moment in every build where you can just freestyle and let your creativity take over. After the final glue up, we have to get things flat again. And in my opinion, the quickest way to do that and most efficient way is with a flattening jig. The other alternatives might be going straight to the drum sander, which would work but might be a little more time consuming and a little more wear and tear on the machine. Or if you feel confident enough to put your end grain board through your planer, that would work as well, but you'd be limited by the size of your planer. With the flattening jig, you can use any size board and you open up some new possibilities to different designs. After the router sled, we'll trim the sides up. Then we'll head back over to the drum sander because there's still quite a bit of smoothing out to do after the router sled. I stick 80 grit on my drum sander and I do both sides until they're nice and smooth. I think it's around this time during the build process when you can start to see your idea come to life and you can take a little moment and enjoy your creation. Because what we have to do next could literally ruin it within a matter of seconds. It's time to put a juice groove on. You want to try to keep all of your clear strips of wood on one side of the board, and then try to keep the natural defects on the other side. These types of details make a big difference in the overall quality and look of your finished product. We're going to use the clearer side for the juice groove. And if you can't avoid having some natural defects on the top side of your board, just try to organize them in a way where they're not in the middle of the board. When I'm adding a juice groove, there's just a couple of things that I try to pay close attention to, and one is to take nice shallow passes. You'll have more control over the router and you'll have a lot less burn marks. The second is I use this rigid palm router, and I find I have more control when I pull the router towards me instead of push it away. So those are just a couple of things that have helped me. Now that the juice groove has been added and your heart rate has come back down, it's time to add all the extra details. I make a few different style finger holds, and I try to keep in mind that these are going to be lifted and moved around quite a bit. So the finger hold is very important. It's got to be comfortable, and I try to make mine fairly deep so your whole hand can grab a hold of the board, not just the fingertip picking it up. So whatever style you're adding to your board, just keep in mind the functionality, because that is an important aspect of all of this. It interacts with somebody on a daily basis. Quality, beauty, and functionality. Those are the key items for me. Because end grain can get so thirsty, soaking your board is really the best option. I'll do 5 to 10 minutes, 2 different times, and then I'll just let them air dry. So if you make cutting boards, you probably make some kind of a board conditioner or a board wax. This is essentially my recipe that I will go over with you. My current ingredients for this include 100% food grade mineral oil, carnauba wax, 100% organic beeswax, and a essential oil lemon scent. I use a 4-to-1 ratio between the wax and the oil. So I'll fill this little mason jar up 4 times, and then in a separate jar I'll do 25% carnauba wax and then 75% beeswax. Applying hot wax to your end grain cutting board has to be one of the best ways to protect it. Because the wax is in an oil form, it's going to soak down into the end grain just like a sponge. And the further down it can get, the more protection it's going to provide. So even if this board gets a little neglected in the beginning of its life and doesn't get conditioned or seasoned, I know there's a little extra protection built in, so this board should last a little bit longer before the first re-oiling. And while I wait for that hot wax to cure, I'll go ahead and batch out some of my own board conditioner. There you have it, 2 completely different boards made from the same pile of wood. I'm glad I went with a second version. It really helped exercise my creativity. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care from the wood plank.